ready.
All right. We are here at the June 28th, 2021 study session concerning the budget. And we have Commissioner Vice Mayor Trent Davis participating virtually, as well as Finance Director Debbie Pack, who is also going to be participating with us virtually today. So I will turn it over to whoever I am turning it over to, physically or virtually. So.
Sure. I'll kick things off quickly, but certainly want to thank Debbie and Commander for her willingness to lead this conversation remotely while she's on vacation. As you know, this is budget season, budget, and more budget. So she's certainly in the know and in the lead, and I appreciate her willingness to join us today. So you all have the study session packet that was distributed, and we can put that on the screen. And Debbie's been in contact with the outside agencies about the information that's in that packet. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Debbie.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So today's really our last budget study session before we have to start making some of our final decisions and putting our budget together, which will happen on at our July 12th meeting. Today, we're going to talk to all the outside agencies. They should be there in person. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about themselves and their ask for the 2020 budget. We'll look at the sub-CIP or the CIP for 2022 and some of the staffing and pay plan recommendations that staff is looking at for the 2022 budget. So with that being said, we'll start with the outside agencies. I have provided some backup information for each of these agencies, so I think what I'll do is I'll just give a brief overview of that finance, and most of this is just historical financing information. I'll give you that, and then I'll ask those representatives to come forward and give you their information as well. So the first agency that we'll talk about is OCCK. From a budgetary standpoint, we've been supporting them for years. As we know, in 2021, the dollars that we had to put into OCCK were significantly decreased because of COVID and because KDOT chose to support their portion, which is typically 70% at 100% for a period of time for about a year. So our contribution to them for both 2020 and 2021 were significantly lower. Their request for this year is $818,205, which is about a 0.8% increase over the original 2020 act. So at this point, I think there's representatives from OCCK there, and we'd ask them to come forward and tell us what's been going on at OCCK.
All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Debbie, thank you. Patrick Wallerius, I'm the Vice President CFO of OCCK. I'm going to start it off. I'd like to introduce Trell Gintner. She is OCCK's Transportation Director. She has a presentation slide, and we will make this really quick. And then after that, I will get through some of the budget processes. So, Trell.
Hi there, Trell Grinter, OCCK Director of Transportation. And we can go ahead and get our slides going there. Perfect. So just our quick little annual review. For our CityGo service, we gave 357 rides in 2020. That was a little bit decreased from our 2019 because of COVID. Transportation all across the nation took a huge hit with that one. We are seeing that pick back up. We were pretty low in the kind of the February area because it was so darn cold outside. But right now in 2021, we are sitting at 69,969. So we are just shy of 70,000 rides, and that is not including our June numbers. Flipping over, got a quick little graph there for you. So you can see that huge dip last year in Q2, right when we found out about our pandemic. And we are building that service back up. Salina's ridership is really, really amazing. They truly rely on all of our drivers to get to where they need to go. So it's been amazing to see that climb so quickly when other transit agencies across the nation haven't seen it climb quite as quickly. Okay, real quick on Paratransit. That's our demand response. We gave 30,000 rides in 2020. Right now we're sitting about 12,800 in 2021. Once again, February, when it was so cold, people just did not want to leave their houses, so we saw that dip. But really, really that paratransit, people were really feeling confident in that one through the pandemic because one person at a time in a van, we were really able to meet the need that way and make people feel truly secure and safe with our procedures. Okay. Also paired a little graph with that one as well, so you can see once again that Q2, and then as Q3 and Q4 of 2020 came through, we saw that ridership increase. Again, we did an amazing job. We have a great risk manager that got information to our drivers. We did not have the turnover that we were expecting to potentially see with the dangers of COVID in a public job. But with that and the education and masks that we were able to provide for our riders, we kept that ridership feeling super confident in us. And then altogether, our CityGo and Paratransit on-demand ridership is on the next slide. We do see that little decrease into Q1. Once again, it was so darn cold. We saw a huge dip in February, but we are already building that number back up. Okay, on to our next slide. COVID-19, we provided masks for all of our drivers and all of our passengers. We also thought it was very, very important to provide the education piece to them. Where better to get information you can see scroll by or provided by a driver. Our drivers see so many people every single day. It was a huge asset to the community to get that information to them in such a consistent way. Social distancing, we maintained that and still have a bit of social distancing on our vehicles as well. People are still required to wear masks if they are wanting to get onto a vehicle. Our drivers still provide those masks. So even though we know they already have a mask, they probably have 7 in their purse because we all have 7 in our purse, we still have that supply of masks to give out to our riders so they can get to where they're going, whether that be health, nutrition, or work. And then we disinfect all of our vehicles and our offices. We have a disinfecting machine that provides a coating, and it sits, and as it dries, it kills all of those germs, so we have not seen a transference of COVID through our vehicles. Okay, next slide. Every year we like to award our safe drivers. We are building and building. Every year we see more and more safe drivers for a grand total of 107 years of safe driving altogether. We had 31 drivers this year that were awarded. Okay, some current projects. We are working on that building expansion. If you haven't seen it, it went up pretty stinking quick, and we're expecting that to be done at the end of July. Fingers crossed that it's the beginning of August. We have increased our staff infrastructure. When I took the lead, I recognized a huge need for leadership infrastructure on the team. We are giving so many rides. If those drivers and our dispatchers did not have leadership, we would have felt a decrease in rides. Now we have more consistent drivers with safety and follow through. And then our leaders are looking for opportunities to network in the community to continue building that ridership. Next, trainer certification for the leaders. I could do everything myself as the director, but that doesn't get more people in the picture. So it's really important to me to have my leaders certified in first aid and CPR, transit assault awareness, and then also rural transit assistance program. And that provides all of our drivers and leaders with the confidence they need to successfully do their jobs and know that we've got their backs. With that certification, man, we can rock the world. Then our training program is going through an update. We made it even more comprehensive and easy to follow. It's very easy to put somebody in front of a computer screen, but that's not where we develop solid drivers. They develop, yes, we do have to have that theory practice on the computer a little bit, but they develop by following current drivers that are succeeding. So that is rolling out as we speak. We've got about 4 new drivers training right this moment. Okay, hopping to community events. Our holiday give and go was a success. We donated a ton of food to the Salina Food Bank. Another way that we're impacting the community, we have just launched our Guide and Go. It is a national initiative to promote public transportation. A lot of times when I go and chat with people, they just don't know how to ride the bus. I've never ridden the bus, I don't know how. It can be intimidating, especially if you're new to a community or in rural Kansas. There's not much options for public transportation. So if we can get the confidence into the public's hands, they're gonna feel even more confident hopping on the red bus, transferring at 7th and Walnut to the blue bus to get to exactly where they need to go and then back home. Okay, Can Cycle turns 2. Our bike share in Salina had a little bit of a rocky road through COVID, but we're back up and running and people are loving it. Then a little bit more about COVID-19. We gave free rides to every vaccine clinic. People loved that option. Not always did people have the time to have a family member come take them, and then we all know when you get that phone call for your COVID vaccine, you got to get there. So we were able to make that last minute phone call work really well for people. Next, a little civic duty. We gave free rides to vote. We think that's really important for people to have access to their voting polls. Everything was free that day. And then we're really excited to continue our support of the Smoky Hill River Festival. We have given free rides to them in the past, and we're excited to keep that going as well. Okay, now 2021 and beyond, we have applied for some grant money with KDOT to continue improving our service in Salina. Our fixed route software would equip our CityGo buses with updated technology to count passengers on and off and whether they have the need for a mobility device. So then that means even more data I can get into your hands and even clearer, cleaner data as we make decisions going forward. Mobility hubs is kind of a new term. That just signifies that, man, at 7th and Walnut, we've got bikes, we've got CityGo, our Paratransit can hop in and serve people at 7th and Walnut, and then we also have our 81 connection coming into that same location, and our Can Connect, a new service that goes to Abilene. So that just really provides the passengers at 7th and Walnut at Walmart with even more options. Number 3, Microtransit. This is once again another new piece to public transportation, kind of a little craze going through the United States. It's like an Uber or a Lyft option, but at a public transportation price. With that, we'd have potentially 1 or 2 vehicles being able to give rides to the times that CityGo and Paratransit are not operating. So those people that are working overnight, maybe sanitation in those overnight periods, and they don't want to have to wait a whole hour to get on the CityGo bus to get back home. And then number 4 is another initiative that we're just getting started, Work and Go. We would love to build partnerships with local businesses to provide rides for their teams or the people that they serve. So that one is up and coming. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I don't have much, anything to add to what Debbie's already said about our budget. It's our request for 2022 is just a little bit more. I think she said 0.08% more than 2019 and 20. 20 was an interesting year. It certainly had up and downs as far as public transportation. We think it's going to continue to improve. We're certainly going to keep trying to expand services. We look at our services as not just transportation, but we look at it as access, especially to the people that really need access. Access to work, access to employment, access to shopping, access to medical appointments. So it's a lot more than just public transportation. It's that access piece. So I think I don't need to ramble on very much unless anyone has any questions. That's pretty much, like I said, our request equals 19 and 20. Of course, 20, KDOT funded 100% of most of the year. There are some conversations circling around KDOT that they might continue the 100% funding through January of 2022. I don't know why they picked January. It seems, I mean, it would have been cleaner if they picked December, but so it might be that the second half of this year, the contract with the city would be reduced accordingly. Again, we haven't had official word on that yet, but we're pretty sure that ridership or the funding, the operation funding, again, KDOT doesn't fund any overhead. They don't fund any repairs, maintenance, any upkeep upon our building facility. A lot of the office staff we consider overhead is not funded. But we should know something probably in the next month, whether or not KDOT is going to continue the 100%. And if they go into January, obviously our request would be somewhat adjusted back then. So again, I don't know for sure, but it's been, we got a lot of things, as Cheryl pointed out, a lot of things that's on the drawing board. We want to keep making services better for the general public, make it more ridership friendly. Technology is certainly a piece of this. Some of the, she talked about the ADA part of the software will announce stops instead of us going over the intercom. So there's really some exciting stuff, and we certainly plan on continuing to offer the best service we can. So without any questions, that's pretty much it.
Any questions for OCCK?
Could you tell me what the paratransit is again? I missed that.
Paratransit, Mike, is Commissioner, is on-demand service where people call up and schedule a ride. It's kind of a door-to-door type service. Generally, it's mostly medical. There certainly is some employment. There's some shopping, but generally it's a medical.
Okay. And how does that differ from the microtransit, I guess?
Microtransit, and Cheryl could probably explain this better than I can, would serve the community hours that we are not running. Like CityGo runs from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it basically would be an overnight run. It would also pick up Sundays, and we only run from 9 to 5 on Saturdays. So basically what we're looking at, if I'm right, it would be that we would take the hours that we're not running, and we would be providing services.
So basically the paratransit and the microtransit both work like an Uber.
Basically.
They're very, very
Okay.
similar.
Right.
Now, is there a charge for those, or is that?
We've been charging $2.
It's $2 in
Yeah.
Saline County, basically.
Now, what we might do if KDOT continues to fund the operation to get some ridership back, and obviously we lost some ridership, it's coming back. There is a lot of negative publicity concerning public transportation in the middle of the pandemic. People don't ride public transportation. You're gonna catch COVID, but we might present to Mike and Mike to the City Commission, maybe during the time if KDOT is going to fund all of it, we might do free fares for a while. Kansas City Metro, which a lot of the bigger agencies are going zero fares lately, so we thought that might be something we might propose at a later date. So,
And just a couple other real quick. The Abilene and Concordia runs, is part of that funded through either one of those communities?
Well,
Abilene or Concordia?
It's KDOT funded. What our request, if you look at it, looks at, we tried to, our total request at KDOT is $4.7 million. We know CityGo is 100% Salina, and we try to carve out as much of the para and the non-related Salina transportation. We try to carve that out. So our request to the cities based upon 2.9 million instead of the 4.7 million, which is our grant with KDOT. We know pretty much how to carve out what we're doing outside of Salina. We know with expenses associated with the Abilene services, the Concordia services, the 81 connection services. So we kind of, we're capable of carving it out. Salina is not funding any expenses associated with anything that's not provided within Salina.
So is there a cost accounting report on that or anything that we see as a city? I'll look at Mr. Scragg.
I give year-end financial reports. Of course, it's part of, transportation is part of OCCK, which is a regular complex financial statement, but I do slide it to Mike or Debbie, the balance sheet and income statement as it relates to, at the end of every year. Again, it's hard to read to the degree that we get a lot of funding from a lot of different sources. As you know, Salina Regional Health Center gives us money. We contract with the 3 managed care organizations that the state of Kansas contracted with to provide non-emergency medical transportation the people who are developmentally disabled, but they also have to be eligible for Medicaid. So those are kind of statewide services that that we provide. So it's all, if you look at our income statement, it's kind of all together. It will show the numerous amount of funding sources we have.
Anyone else?
Or some, go ahead, Carl. I appreciate your commitment to accessibility. I find myself wondering, when it comes to the paratransit and just economics being what they are, doesn't it seem that and the Uber riding, the micro transportations, wouldn't they, in a practical way, ravage the bus riding when you can call and get a personal ride? Why would I want to take the bus? So I'm just feeling a conflict right there.
Okay.
And then the other aspect I want to ask about is how do I, on behalf of the taxpayers of Salina, know that we're segregating the expenses for the citizens of Salina in that budget? I mean, you've got a new transit building. Was that all that funding run through Salina? And are your buses for Abilene and Concordia now? And 81 Link, are they using that building? The training that you've got, is that all being funded? Is that new administration and those new positions, they're all being funded through Salina? Or that cost apportioned out to the other entities? I mean, I guess I have to give you some credit for expanding your services through the area, but I think the taxpayers of Salina are seeing the expenses go up, particularly in the paratransit, and that's problematic to me as one foot in the bill.
Okay, one thing, let me define paratransit, especially within Salina. To qualify, you have to qualify to be eligible for paratransit, which means you have to have some kind of medical condition or some other condition that protrudes you from riding CityGo. There's an application we fill out, we look at the application, and we approve it or don't approve it. But in Salina, paratransit you have to be pre-qualified and you have to be approved, and it's got to be based upon, generally, it's a medical condition, or if it's more than a half mile or a mile, I can't remember exact distance, from the nearest CityGo stop. So paratransit is the people who ride paratransit in Salina really are unable, physically or mentally, whatever reason, to ride CityGo. It's an FTA requirement. It's an ADA requirement that we have to do that for people to qualify to ride para. I think we're pretty good. The answer, Commissioner Ryan, your other question, I think we've been doing this enough that we can kind of we know what costs associated with Salina, what costs associated with 81 Connection. 81 Connection buses are garaged in Belleville. Abilene, they're garaged in Abilene. Concordia, they're garaged in Concordia. Our non-emergency medical transportation vehicles, of course, are garaged here. So we tried. We think we can. We think we have it down pretty good. That we know the expenses associated. I have a cost center on 81 Connection. I have a cost center on Concordia. I have a cost center on Abilene. So I know exactly what those expenses are. I know exactly what income we're getting from both KDOT and from the city of Concordia. It gives us a little of the match. Concordia came up just like 2 weeks' notice that they let KDOT know that they were no longer going to continue to do services within the city limits of Concordia. KDOT has a long history with us. They know that we're one of the few agencies across the state that would be able to jump in and take over that service. So in a matter of 2 weeks, we're going to start July 1, we're going to assume that role. We hired the local people that worked for the senior center. The match will come. It was a good thing. It couldn't be better timing if it's true that KDOT's going to match for the next eight months, 7 months. So it's because we were kind of scratching our head, how we were going to do that. But I think our accounting we pretty much know. Again, repeating myself, the whole KDOT application is almost $5 million. We used $3.5 million as far as associated with Salina, and take off the 70% there. The only part that you could say overhead that relates to other services would be training. Most of the training is done within Salina and at our Salina facility. We don't have a facility in any other community that we can do this kind of training. Our training is extensive, detailed, complex, so we want to make sure that our drivers are adequately trained. But yes, our 81 connection drivers trained out of Salina, and is there some minor charge associated with them coming to Salina for training? Yes, there is. I don't think, we track fuel, we track expenses for all of the services that are, Salina, Abilene, Concordia, the whole thing. So again, we've been able to keep, I remember Commissioner Hodges asked me 2 years ago that don't quit coming back with huge increases. So this year, we tried to keep it. We were fortunate enough. Two things happened within the last year, and also that allowed us to raise our starting wage to $15 an hour, which is almost a necessity for us to continue providing quality services. We just weren't getting the applicants. We weren't getting qualified applicants. It's amazing what that difference from going to $15 an hour did. Now, we were able to do that through two funding sources. The Kansas legislature approved a 5% increase in DD funding, Developmental Disabled Medicaid funding, and an increase in our contract with the MCOs for non-emergency transportation allowed us to do this. We look at drivers. We have 50-some drivers. The whole transportation department is like 75 employees. It's kind of company within a company. We consider drivers as direct service staff, so the $15 an hour starting wage only relates to direct service staff. It was tough, but we just had that opportunity. We kind of, for lack of a better term, stuck our neck out there saying, funding's going to have to continue. Once we start at 15, we can never go back down, but we think we have the funding, and we think the Medicaid funding is going to be in place with expansion, and Trell and her team, the MCO work we do for them, which helps with the match and helps us offset some of the expenses. So.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Valerius, you had mentioned cost increases and those type of things, and the things that historically have contributed to that are service expansion or new initiatives, adding a route, the storage building,
Sure.
those type of things. And with the things that you've identified going forward, do you see any of those representing cost increases to the city in the out years?
I cannot say no, but I don't think so. That's why we were able to keep 2022 funding the same as 20 and 21. We think some of our other services are going to pick up the match and the slack, and we are very grateful from what Salina supports it. I was talking to Commissioner Peck earlier, him and John Veneer and Kay Crawford, and we can't thank the other two, were the first commissioners that I came before that approved funding for this. So, and it's increased obviously over time. The answer to your question, Mike, I don't see. Obviously, we're going to have expenses increased. Lord knows where fuel is going to go. Probably my biggest fear is what's going to happen to the cost of fuel. Staff, I can manage some of the other overhead items. I can manage fuel. I can't. We all know fuel has taken a huge increase over the last few months. Our budget is like a contract with KDOT. Unfortunately, we submitted to KDOT in November, December. It doesn't take effect until July because that's KDOT's fiscal year. So we're 8 months out from the time we present our budget to KDOT when it actually takes effect. But one thing about the agreement is it is an agreement. They give us X amount of dollars, and for every reason we go over that amount, it's 100% ours. We don't have any. It's just like a construction contract. If you're going to bid $100,000 to build something, if it goes 110, you're not going to get paid 110. So we're kind of at the mercy, and we think we have it planned out good enough that is not an issue, and we hope it never is an issue. But we are kind of committed to that, and I can. it's so convoluted with different funding sources, it's kind of hard to say, well, Abilene, I know what Abilene costs, I know what the income is, I know what its expenses are. I know what Concordia income expenses are. I know what 81 Connection income expenses are. Para, we pretty much know what part is Salina and what part isn't. The one thing about all of these services, or most of these services, especially the 81 Connection, Concordia, the Paratransit mainly, it benefits Salina the most. People aren't traveling from Salina to Concordia or Salina to Beloit. People are traveling from Salina or from these surrounding communities to Salina. They're coming here for medical, they're coming here for shopping, they're coming here for whatever reason. So anything that we do expand services really helps Salina more than you would think, because we kind of, 81 Connection kind of helps out Belleville and Concordia and Minneapolis, but 90% of the people come to Salina. They're seeking medical treatment here, they're seeking shopping, they're doing whatever. So it might look like we're doing a lot of services that's outside Salina, but Salina is the one that's benefiting from this, because this is where the people are coming. So, I mean, obviously, there's some that's not. We take on the non-emergency medical, and this is part of course, Salina Regional Health funding, which we give the city credit for that, is, we go all over the state. We go to Wesley and Wichita. We go to KU Med Center. We go anywhere that the MCO has asked us to do. So that's, but that we can kind of carve out. So, long answer, Commissioner Ryan. I'm sorry, but that's kind of where we are. I think we can do a pretty good job of segregating services and what Salina should fund and what the other services or other communities fund. I'm fortunate that Salina is one of the few communities that fund public transportation. The city of Abilene does a lot of funding. With KDOT, none of this would be possible without KDOT. I know Trell and her team is their work cut out for them, basically for Concordia, is to try to get the matching funds for that. So, we really are kind of proud of ourselves for the confidence and faith that KDOT puts in us. Like I said, in a 2-week period of time, we turned around Concordia, and we could do that anywhere. So, the thing we started with the hospital 20-some years ago, what we call MedEvan, is still a model throughout the state that the other agencies and KDOT uses. So we've been on the forefront, and we've been a leader as far as public transportation. That means we expand services. Will we continue to expand services? I hope so. Should we ever be totally, really satisfied with what we're doing? No. But we keep that perspective in, as much as I appreciate the commissioners for the last 15 years or so that's offered to fund this, that we know that we should keep our funding request only to what would be we considered part of Salina services. So you want to add anything? I don't.
Yeah, so all of the data that we come with, my dispatchers can correlate exactly where people are going. So the numbers that I gave you, that is just for Salina. I did not include Abilene rides or 81 Connection rides in those numbers. So what you're seeing is exactly what is coming from Salina, basically Salina to Salina in those numbers. And so you really get to see the meat and potatoes of our business is serving people in Salina and creating accessible services. And Pat said it really well with your question with, well, microtransit, paratransit, how is that not going to take over CityGo? Well, in some places, they have recognized that their town is small enough that it can, and it's app-based, and it gives people that on-demand. Salina is so big that we would not be able to keep up with that demand, and people would not be able to get to where they're going. Not to mention, CityGo makes it makes a lot of financial sense to have people sharing the rides on CityGo versus individuals in vans. We're able to save on gas that way. We're able to save on driver payments because I don't have people working a ton of overtime in that case. So we will always encourage people to take CityGo because that makes the most financial sense for us, and it's also a really safe and easy option for them. Paratransit, like he said, that's our accessible option for people that can't make it to that City Go stop or for any reason are not going to be successful riding that fixed route system. So we go to their door and provide that amazing door-to-door service for them. He said it correctly, you have to apply for that as well. Microtransit, it's a pilot piece of our brain, so if it doesn't take off in Salina, it is not going to be a part of our budget going forward. That doesn't make sense to start something that people aren't going to want to use. They could, and that'd be really great, but I have to have the data to show that for you guys before we ask for money in that case. But it would fill a need for those hours that Paratransit isn't running to get people to work, back home safely, anything that they're needing. But always City Go, we love our City Go, and it makes the most sense for people. So we'll always fuel people that direction.
A lot of microtransit, we've been having industry, you can talk about this
Yep.
more, that's been asking us to provide services outside of our normal hours.
Yes.
We don't want to keep this going. We already exceeded our time, and I
Yep.
promised Debbie, but I know
Yep.
Swans is interested. I know we're looking at other companies that the different shifts, workers do not have places, that does not have right.
Absolutely.
Taxis is a choice, but it's not a very good choice. Nothing against the taxi companies, but it's not a very good choice.
Sure.
So we thought, Trell and Michelle Griffin, our mobility manager, went to Kansas City and looked at their microtransit operation. It's pretty slick. It's just a supplement to our services. And again,
Absolutely.
we put an application in the KDOT. We wouldn't not be asking the city of Salina a match for this first year. Again, as Charles said, it's a pilot. We don't want to commit to something long-term unless it's really beneficial to the citizens. So we think it will be, and as Salina continues to grow. Unfortunately, well, right, wrong, or different, I don't know. We didn't make the 50,000. The whole transportation picture changes if we become a metropolitan area, but that didn't happen, so there's no use talking about that. But I think there's a lot of interest from manufacturing in town to offer services over and above what we're currently doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I just had one quick follow-up question. In terms of just looking at the trends since 2015, the fixed route expenses or budget items seem to be pretty stable, but then we do have the jump in the paratransit from basically, it looks like around 150,000 up to the 250 for 2022. And I just wondered, is that part of the microtransit that you were referencing, or are people just becoming more aware of it and using it more? Or is there some kind of an increased demand, or?
More of an increased demand
Okay.
Absolutely.
than
Okay.
anything else.
Okay.
It's been going up. As I said earlier, public transportation, as far as fixed route services, really took a hit in 2020
Right.
because of COVID-19. Again, I said earlier, people were suggested not to ride public transportation, so that's really increased para. So we think that's going to continue to follow through.
And thank you for remembering my comments from a couple
welcome.
years ago, because, I mean, there was a 13% and a 10%, so
Yes,
getting less to 1%
yes.
is appreciated.
Well, I know one of the things that OCCK does, and does it quite well, not only transportation, but all of our services. Again, public transportation is only probably 10% of OCCK's total operating budget, so we're really diversified. But one thing we do, and we strive to do it well, and we just try to do it as best we possibly can, we think by expanding services, and it seems like KDOT, money, the KDOT doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. I'm not saying it won't ever, but anyway, public transportation, has been a lot of money allocated to public transportation. I think we're going to see even more changes coming within the next couple of years. I want to keep expanding as much as we possibly can. to provide the services, I think, the communities we serve, especially to the people in Salina that really need the services, that we will be able to continue to provide those and provide, affordable and accessible transportation. So that's my spiel.
Mayor,
So-
can I
Yes, oh,
ask
absolutely.
one more question? You're going to think I'm a jerk for asking this, but, don't get me wrong, I think OCCK organization is great. I know you serve people with disabilities and disadvantages in a much broader spectrum than just the transportation part. But once you're on the paratransit list, you fill out that application, are you on there for good, or do you have to fill out one periodically?
annual thing, it's an annual.
What strikes me is, I've got my card with
Right.
I can park in the reserve spaces for people with disabilities, and, you get healed eventually,
Yeah,
and
you
you
still
don't
use
need a
it.
medical service, but I see people park in those special spots all the time at the grocery store, so is there any turnover?
Absolutely. So that is something that I am reviewing with our dispatch coordinator. I want to make sure that we're providing the best service possible to the people that need it. And sometimes disability is temporary and sometimes it is long-term. And so are we recognizing those people that maybe have a broken leg and they're not able to walk to the corner of their street on Santa Fe to wave down the yellow, but we've been picking them up? Are we still picking them up? So I am going to be combing through that information with her to make sure that these people are actually receiving the appropriate service that they need. So that is, you hit the nail on the head. That is something that we've identified recently is, man, we truly have opportunity to help people get to the exact right service. And the guide and go that I was talking about, sometimes people love paratransit because it's comfortable. It's easier for me to know one driver and rely on that one driver than take the risk and be on a bus with a small group of people. And so that travel training is going to be important in bridging that confidence gap. Because maybe it started as a broken leg and maybe now they're capable of getting to that stop, but they're scared. And so how can I best serve them? But that's going to start by evaluating the people that are currently riding and having those conversations. And that's not going to be a quick turnaround because everybody has different things that prevent them or make them ride certain services. But 100% that is going to be evaluated and addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
presentation
Again,
today.
thank you for your past support, and thank you for the funding for our new facility, partial funding. We're looking at July, and we will plan, along with KDOT and FTA, a ribbon cutting, and we certainly will invite all of you, and hopefully you can attend. So, good.
We'll look
Thank
forward
you.
to it. It's impressive. Mr. Scragg, are you looking for direction, or Ms. Pack, direction from us in terms of where we want to be with the funding request on each one of these, or how do you?
Whatever you feel is most productive as a governing body. You certainly, if you want to deliberate and provide some feedback, that would be helpful. Ultimately, I think Ms. Pack's going to go over the timeline, but we'll bring back to you an issues and options
Okay.
punch list.
Okay.
We won't have a meeting next week because of the 5th of July, so
Right.
it'd be the 12th. But
Okay.
any feedback you have today would be helpful.
Okay.
Keep it the way it is. Looks reasonable.
Yes, and as Mike said, we will be coming back to a final decision on the 12th on all of these requests. So if you're not ready to make that decision, or you want to have time to think about it, that'll be coming back on the 12th.
I guess if you have questions or additional information, please share that for sure, so we can
Gotcha.
track that down.
Gotcha.
in
No,
advance.
I do want to let OCCK know that I really appreciate the 0.8% increase. I do, because we're going to see further on down the line, we've got some difficult decisions of our own to make, and thank you for that. All right.
All right. So with that, move on to Salina Chamber of Commerce, Visit Salina. I won't go over a lot of this information because I know that Sylvia will cover this in her presentation. I just did provide that information to the commissioners as backup information, so if you have any additional questions, I can try to answer those, but I'll let Sylvia and her staff come up and give their information.
Hello.
Hello.
Commissioners, staff. Sylvia Rice. I'm the Visit Salina Director for the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. If you want to just go ahead and pull up my stuff, Mr. Wood, that would be awesome. I'm going to start off with some just general information that's in your packet and that Debbie also provided for that matter. Our contract with the city goes back to 1977. It is our responsibility to administer a convention and visitors program on behalf of the city. I included in the packet the breakdown, the current breakdown and distribution of the 6.7% rate that we currently have underway. In that formula, we're at a 3% portion of that. Debbie also provided for you in the packet where that new rate will be when we move to 7.75%. Want to just quickly point out the staff. In addition to myself, we have Tiffany Bedeen, who's our manager of sports and special events. Wave to the folks, Tiffany. And Joanne McClure, who's our manager of the conventions and military market. Would point out for you also that we are a 3-person team now. We did reduce staff by 2 full-time positions during COVID. We are still at that point, and we would anticipate being at that point at least through 2022. Doesn't necessarily mean that the workload changed very much. It just looked a little bit different during COVID. And as we kind of go through the report, I'll kind of point out as we go what we did through COVID quickly, but more importantly, what we're doing now and as we look ahead. Next slide, please. I want to talk about where we are. During the throes of COVID, certainly our staffing changed primarily, quite drastically. We depend entirely on what happens with tourism, obviously, and if you didn't notice, that stopped during COVID. And so certainly our ability to conduct the normal programming that we would do stopped as well. And so we certainly switched gears. And this is sort of how it looked. I would talk about moving to the right. What that really meant was looking at events, conventions, all of those, certainly the group activity, and moving those items to the right. I'll talk about that a little more specifically in each market. We also sort of changed from very directly serving the clients, whether those are leisure travelers or group planners, and serving our local industry. We became intrinsically tied to the hotels, to the attractions, et cetera, to try to help them do whatever we could to help them get people still in the doors. That included the creation by the chamber staff of the Salina Strong website, keeping track of what restaurants are doing delivery, who's doing curbside, what hotels are open or are partially open, and what they're doing for additional sanitation, all of those kinds of things, to try to push business toward them. And so that became an incredibly large part of what we did, was sort of that switch. When we look at the leisure market, which is where we were, when we look at the leisure market, certainly our paid advertising in 2020 went down to a minimum. Number one, we simply didn't have the budget to do a lot of advertising. And number two, the messaging was difficult. There were destinations out there that just kind of continued on with the whole, well, I've got a TV contract, I'm going to go ahead and run those, come see us. And we didn't want to do that. Not only were we trying to renegotiate those contracts, but also the messaging had to be very, very low profile, very soft sell. And it became more about, you know what? We're an awesome place. We've got great stuff here. When you're ready to get out and move and do stuff, we're ready to welcome you. And so certainly our advertising looked very different. Now we're rebuilding. Now we're getting back into the TV game. And now it's about, if you haven't seen Salina lately, you haven't seen Salina. And we're very enthused about all of the, and I'm going to say in quotes, new things. A lot of them were new things before COVID. We just never got a chance to tell anybody about them. And so now we're promoting a lot of the new things that are available to our visitors in town. And we're coming back hard on broadcast, on print, social media, and all of the above. As you know, our budget is delayed. And so even though we're starting to see some things pick up, we're still a little delayed in the transient guest tax flowing. And so we are planning accordingly and kind of rising as we can and pulling back where we need to. We are beginning to see leisure come back, which is really encouraging. And we're seeing some trends nationally. Pretty much all of the travel right now is domestic. And when you put that into a different scope, for us, that means a lot of our visitation is within the state. Although we are picking up on folks who are taking advantage of the drive market that weren't quite ready to fly yet, and we've seen some of that increase as well. The bottom line is people want to do things, they want to go places, but there still is an element of trepidation among some travelers, and it's just going to take some time before we come back full bore. So we are in the midst of doing that reboot of the new, the things that are happening downtown, which I know SDI is going to talk about at length, new businesses, new restaurants, entertainment coming back. It's such a huge deal that concerts are back at the Stiefel, that all of those kinds of things are available to our visitors because that's what we're known for. The Cove is back open. Sculpture tour continued. The changes in air service with Houston on the horizon. Those are all going to be very positive things, particularly in the leisure market. Slide. When we look at the convention and military markets, this is Joanne's bailiwick. And what I would say about that is that Joanne just refused to take no for an answer in 2020. So when you're talking about that sliding to the right, when she got a call from a venue that said, the XYZ Association canceled, she'd say, no, they didn't. I'll call them. What dates do you have available next quarter or in 6 months or this time next year? And so we moved from where a lot of people were ready to say, no, we're not coming, to, no, let's not do that. Let's get you on the books. Let's get you planned and saving that business. Because when they're on the books, it's more likely that they'll stay within the community and not start over with a whole rebid process. And we were really quite successful at doing that. Convention stopped, and then they sort of went digital or went virtual, and then they sort of went hybrid, and then they started to come back. And as of late March, early April, we started to see that business building back up again. Are we having as many conventions at this point? No. Are they as large as they were? No, but they're getting there, and that's the important thing, I think, to remember. That attendance is coming along. The great news is, as 2021, as those moving to the right things are working out, it's getting filled toward the latter part of the year. So hopefully it's, if we don't have issues with any kind of a bounce back with variants and that sort of thing, 2021, 2022 looks pretty good in the conventions market. And kudos to the folks that host those conventions, getting through 2020 with the distancing and the additional sanitation and all that. TPEC and all of the hotels did an admirable job of trying to get those events done, and now they're ready to move on ahead. It's difficult to find available dates. Yay. That's a great problem to have. Big news again in conventions, a large insurance convention that we hosted for decades and left us because we didn't have an appropriate place for them to meet. They insisted on doing all of their events under one roof in the majority of their hotel rooms, and we couldn't do that any longer, and they went away. Well, this spring they came back because they were willing to look at things differently, finally. And between the venue folks and Joanne, they put together a program that they bid off on, and they had a tremendous time here. They were at TPEC, which they would never even look at before. They were at TPEC, and they stayed all across town, and they were in all parts of the community having a great time. And we were hearing over and over from the 300-plus folks that were here in June, I had no idea. I'm coming back with my family, and you can't buy that kind of marketing. So we're super excited about that. We have them penciled in for next year. Military events are currently on the 2021 calendar, and as of now, they are planning for 2022. I always say that with kind of a question mark at the end because it is the government and it is military, so that's what the plan is at this point. Equifest was back this year for year 2, and next year they'll be back for year 3 in their 3-year contract with us. Slide. When you look at sports and special events, that's where Tiffany Benin shines. And when you look at what happened during 2020 and moving into the current time period, the field house closure cost several events, but bookings started back up as soon as the doors were open. And that facility is busy as we speak, and continues to look to be doing really well through the rest of this year. The outdoor play for 2020, outdoor recreation play, baseball, softball, continued through an agreement between Keep Salina Playing and Parks and Recreation, and the hotels were tremendously thankful because it made all the difference to some of them. And 2021 tournament play looks very, very robust. gotta tell you, you've all heard maybe as much about turf as you ever want to hear. I don't know, but I'm going to tell you this. With the turf edition at Dean Evans, we immediately booked two brand new events that had never been here before. The NJCAA Region 6 baseball tournament and also the American Legion A state tournament. And so, hello, that was great news. Keisha events went kind of through all sorts of changes between 2020 and now. Again, kudos to those venues who were able to distance those state events when necessary. But baseball and softball were right back on to their regular footprint this spring, and that was tremendous, 8 teams each. Of course, we had thunderstorms because it's state baseball and softball. You can kind of just count on that. Great news was at Evans, we played right through on time, no problems. At Bill Burke with softball, they delayed it 1 day, but they were still able to finish in a 2-day format, which was tremendous. Those grounds crew did a great job getting that ready. And we also set an all-time high attendance at softball this year for that event being here. And KKOA's back in July, and that's a huge indication of quote-unquote normalcy when it comes to tourism, I think. Go ahead and slide, Jacob. Just to give you a quick visual, this shows you back to 1990, the largest dips that the hotel industry has seen in occupancy and daily rate. It shows you where 9/11 was. It shows you where tourism took a big dive in 8-9, and then it shows you what happened in 2020. So this was the worst decline in U.S. history in this industry overall, and I think that really shows it quite obviously. Slide. Where are we at right now? We tend to look at hotel performance. Sorry, I set myself a timer, Debbie. We tend to look at hotel performance to give ourselves an indication of how we're doing. And so just quickly, we took a snapshot of the month of April in 19, 20, and 21. The bottom line is that from 19 to 20, our occupancy dropped almost 68%. And in 21, our 45.5% occupancy rate was only 33% below 19, which is actually really pretty good news. They estimate that we're not going to see tourism come back to 19 rates or 19 levels until at least 2024. And so we're pretty encouraged by these numbers. Our average daily rate is only down 8.3% from 2019. And honestly, that was something we were fairly worried about at one point because it did become kind of a rate war. When we talk to the hotels, here's what they're telling us their challenges are. Like everybody else, our number one is hiring employees. They just can't find them. Number two is staff burnout, and that's because the general manager is now doing the night audit and possibly setting up for breakfast in the morning, and the front desk clerk maybe helping clean the pool, and et cetera, et cetera. That's how they're all operating. People who have multiple hotel properties are just sharing staff. They also talk about the concern about more competition as more hotels seem to be on the horizon, and they're concerned about that. And the leisure trend that's changing is instead of people booking out their travel, it's sort of more like jumping in the car and let's do a quick weekend in Salina, and they're calling from an hour and a half out looking for a room. And so that's a bit of a challenge when it comes to staffing. The positives are they're feeling really hopeful. The calls for business are picking up. And one hotel even forecasts that their gene occupancy looks like it's going to be above 80%. So that is tremendous. Jacob? When you talk about the budgeting process, Debbie asked me to provide our income sources. Our income sources are the transient guest tax and our program activities. Those are things like a sporting event where by hosting the event, maybe we're getting a percentage of the gate. To be honest with you, pretty much all the money that we take in program activities turns right back around and goes back into that program. This year, we're budgeting for a $700,000 transient guest tax budget direct to our program. Debbie has budgeted slightly less than that, which is normal. We hardly ever budget exactly the same, but we're going to shoot for it. What's listed for CARM and KO are just the amounts that would be offshoots from that percentage that we're looking at. And so the total into the our budget would be $700,000, with the rest of that being sort of a pass-through. Slide. And when you look at the expenses, quite frankly, what I did was I looked at 19, I looked at what we had done thus far in 21, and we worked from there and kind of met ourselves in the middle about what we thought we would be doing in 2022. Fund balances at the end of 2020. There are 3 specific fund balances that we share with you each year. Our Visit Salina designated funds at the end of 2020 was at just over 112,000. The Kenwood Oakdale was just over 80, and Cultural Arts Regional Marketing, or CARM, was at about 141. That was at the end of 2020. There have been changes since then. Obviously, we're halfway through this year. But I would say that a couple of primary adjustments to those dollars would be in CARM. There will be a rebate back to the city per guidelines. That's somewhere in the area of about $60,000, so that will be coming. The designated funds on Visit Salina, I know that has come down also based on where we ended up with some later expenses into 2021. And currently, we're in the process of working on developing new guidelines for both of those funds with the goal of potentially freeing up some dollars that could be redistributed another way by the city. So as far as what is our request, is we've taken a stab at guessing what we think transit guest tax will do. But honestly, as I've told the city manager and others, our request is that we stay at the 3% that we've been at. We have always risen and fallen depending upon what transit guest tax does. And we've been, I think, really good stewards of those dollars in looking at expenses and keeping a pretty tight hold on them, especially when it looks like things are not coming in exactly where we had budgeted. So I came close to the buzzer time, Debbie, but not exactly. But I would be happy to answer questions, and we're always happy to answer questions if you have them. Reach out to me or anybody on the staff, especially if it is concerning their specific areas.
Any questions for Ms. Rice? None? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks to all the Visit Salina team for dealing with a 40% staff reduction and yet still finding a way to at least consider the possibility of a $60,000 rebate to the city. Truly appreciate your hard work the last year, and hopefully we'll see a quicker recovery than what's anticipated.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And Mayor Hodges?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I could, yeah, I can't stress the importance of how hard these 3 folks are, and previously those 5 folks were in that office, as far as, making that downtown Salina reality happen. I mean, these are the folks who are actually driving a lot of the expendable income that supports the sales tax downtown. They really work hard.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia, and you did a great job of keeping to your timeline. The next agency that we'll hear from is Salina Community Economic Development Organization. I just provided in here the agreement that we have with SEDO, and just a reminder that the funding for this particular agency is on a 3-year term. So what we set in 2022 will be what we kind of set for 2022, 2023, and 2024. Provided information about where it began, where that funding began, and where those levels were. So I believe probably Mitch is in the audience, and he'll give you an update on what they've been doing. They've been doing a lot of work. And kind of where their request is this year. So, thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. It's good to be here, Mike. First off, I want to introduce, I've got 2 board members here. Pete Baumgarten is here, and John Gunn, who represent, they're somewhat hiding behind the pole back here, I think. But as you know, we got a former mayor there, and he's been able to talk about, well, back when, many times during our meetings over the last several years. I appreciate his guidance very much. And then also Robin Van Atta. Robin works with me, keeps me in line, does a lot of the heavy lifting and preparations of documents like you're going to see today. But it's exciting to be here. It's hard to believe that this is the third time that we've come before the commission. The first time was the formation year back in 16, and then you'll see later on how we've gone through our budgeting process. Like everyone else, it's been an interesting time this past year. We've been a little bit luckier than most that we've been able to survive and just kind of make a pivot on how we do economic development. In our segment, we talk about the different pieces of the pie or the legs of the stool. We talk about tourism, we talk about retention, we talk about recruitment. All those pieces are important, and we've got a lot of our partners here today talking to you all about funding. And this is something, the partnership is something I always want to stress. The chamber is very critical to what we do, the airport authority, the city staff. This is a team effort, so I'm going to get into what I've got because I know we've got a limited amount of time. We're going to run through these pretty quick, Jacob. So we're going to go on to the next one. The first project we want to talk about is the One Vision Aviation. This was October 26th when we did the ribbon cutting. You can go ahead and move on to the next one. This is just a little bit of estimates, the original estimates of what they expected. They did get up to somewhere around 75 to 80 prior to the COVID impact. At that time, you saw a huge increase of jets being stored at the airport. The regional jets that we get into Salina, the 50-seaters, they had estimated they wanted to be up around 250 the first year. Well, they got close to 100, and then unfortunately they fell down to the 30 or so that they bottomed out at. Now we can say it's reversed itself. They are over or right at 250 with their current workforce. They see that number growing. They continue to estimate 450 is where they want to be at when they can get the people hired. So it's something that the chamber, through their programs, the airport authority, and we've been working with them trying to find places for workers to live. This is not a surprise, something you haven't heard. Housing is a critical issue. And for this project, this company is one because they are literally bringing in people from all over the country to that have experience as airframe and power plant mechanics, people that are specialists in this field that do make a good income in their income, and they're basically in a 24 and up range is where they're going toward. The base rate is a little over $21, that's counting all the positions. So they see this growing. As you can see, go ahead and move on next slide. It's a little bit, you can get some reading later tonight, but they had been up, as I said here, to the 250, and then currently 250, and then are headed to the 450 range. Go ahead, next slide one. This is a quote and some pictures from the announcement out at the airport. But if you go by there, and I encourage you to go by and see with the aircraft they have out there, it's reassuring to me the amount of checks that airplanes have to go through to be ready to fly. Heavy checks, I've learned more in the last year about the requirements that Jim Sponder and his company have to do to make these airplanes certifiable to be able to fly. So that's reassuring as a user of our aviation industry.
Mr. Robinson, if I could just interject with just a couple of questions in terms of the employees. And certainly I don't need this information today, but maybe in the days and weeks ahead, it would be helpful to have. So out of the 250 employees that One Vision has at this point, are we looking at like, those are all 250 employees and their families that are relocating to Salina? You mentioned some of them coming from across the country. Are these contract employees? And of the remaining 200 that they hope to add, just in terms of planning with, with our housing plan that we're doing, what's the percentage of employees that are realistically going to be locating here versus the ones that are, say, coming up from Wichita and spending the week at a, like a long-term hotel or living in some kind of a, mutual dorm situation?
They actually were having people sleep on other employees' couches.
Right,
That's what
right,
they were,
right.
the story that was going
Right.
around. I could be more than happy to get that information right off the top of my head. I don't have that.
Yeah, I
but we'd be
didn't-
glad-
no, I
We'd be
didn't
glad
expect you
to,
to.
and it's something, it's really made a huge impact on K-State. Their A&P program has gone from having 8 students to double, triple digits. I don't know what the current number was, but I know it's really changed how their enrollment has gone, and it's helped the college tremendously. But I'll get those numbers, and I know Eric has worked with that, but we'll get those to you.
Thank you.
And we know Lauren, and some of that information has been provided to Lauren, but we'll get more details for you.
Thank
Glad
you.
to.
Thank
Glad
you.
to. Next up, and let me, one of the things that's really exciting, the state of Kansas has recently been given the Golden Shovel Award, which is an economic development award, and we've been named the top state in the upper Midwest, which is the first time in many, many years. And that's based on the job numbers, the investment amounts. There was 5 projects that have been picked by the state to go and promote to consultants and other companies when we go out and make these visits with companies. A lot of that now is being still is being done via electronic formats. And out of those 5 projects, it was great to hear 2 of them were here in Salina. This project, Tony's project, and then the Great Plains projects. So out of the whole state, that was something pretty proud. And this was being promoted to consultants, people that handle projects. So it was kind of exciting and gratifying for us to hear, the relationship we have with folks in Topeka is critical for the growth of the community. So Swans, this was August 10th, was kind of a weather day like the last few days have been. That day was pretty warm. Commissioner, I think you were probably sweating it up there with all the bigwigs there. But the next page, let's go ahead. We'll run through these pretty quick. You all have seen these. The black shaded area, that is the building, the 400,000 square feet. I was lucky to get a tour of that a week ago this past Friday. And the building walls are pretty much 90% done, other than the very south end. And at that time, there was about a third of the roof already on, and probably now half of the roof is on, if they were able to make the progress rates that they'd been having. Currently, there's about 100 construction workers, and once they get that building enclosed, that number is going to go up pretty quickly to about 450 workers. When they get all the equipment in the building, setting that, doing the wiring, doing the plumbing, all of that, we'll see another surge in hotels for people here from all over that are in the construction industry. So we're excited about that. As part of this project, as you all know, it was a $600 million investment by the company. It'll be spent over several years, adding the new equipment, the 2 production lines that will be making, I heard this number the other day, they will be producing a truckload, a semi-truckload, that's a 53-footer, the big ones, a truckload of pizza in an hour. So that's how fast these two new machines are. So a lot of pizza being made here. That $600 million investment was also, as you all are quite aware of, the city was able to get a $3.8 million EDA grant, and then also a $2.1 million KDOT grant, all for drainage work, street and transportation improvements related to the project. So we're excited about being able to bring in that outside money into the community. Next, please. Here's the investment numbers I talked about, the job numbers. Currently, they are at the 1,200, and we'll be adding the 42 year 2, and then I'll wrap up with the 183, which will total right at 225 new jobs. Next. Just a couple pictures. This is the south end of the building. That's an old picture. That's pretty much all finished up now. And I'd encourage anybody to go down. Very unique construction. They brought in insulated concrete forms from Kansas City. One trailer load would take one form. So they trucked those in here and had them up that day or the next day whenever it arrived. So interesting concept, but quite efficient in terms of the building insulation and keeping everything nice and cold. Okay, go ahead, next. And then the same week I think it was on Thursday, the same week that Swans announced, we had our Great Plains announcement. They are acquiring the former Signify building, and will be, as of the end of next month, will be fully acquiring the building and starting the transition. This is for the new track loader. This is part of the construction equipment investment that Kubota is making with Great Plains. We will be seeing a extension of new construction equipment that they're bringing from Japan to Salina, and we're quite excited about their plans. The investments was about, as you see here, $53 million with the acquisition, and that'll be a long-term situation filling that building. They will not be filling that up immediately. It'll be over a several-year period. And as you see at year 4, there'll be another 250 to 300 workers coming in. I think we've all heard a little bit more about that. It's quite a investment by the company, and much like Swans, when you have a new company take over local ownership and you see this kind of investment, it's very reassuring that they've made a long-term decision to support the company, which is always, it's always a question mark. On the last page, you just see there's a couple more pictures of the announcement there. It was made at Great Plains headquarters. Let's go ahead and move ahead. There we go. Changing subjects. One of the efforts our organization's geared to is attraction, but also we've been tasked, along with the chamber, jointly to be working on entrepreneurship. This was our startup event back in September of 18 with our startup Salina. Over the time before COVID, we had rotated between morning meetings and evening meetings with a lot of different local successful business people. As you can see there, that was Todd Welsh that was the speaker that morning. And it's been exciting. Now we're trying to reboot, as we're calling it. Right now, we've been away for so long. We're trying to get some speakers lined up, and hopefully this next month, we'll have our first one coming in. But go ahead and run through these next ones, Jacob. Go ahead. Just some additional. I don't want to really not wasting time, but y'all have got a full agenda here. So that was for several sponsors: Evergy, SS&P, ISG, and then First Bank all helped sponsor that program for the first 2 years. And we'll be going out and getting more sponsors. And then that's some of our partners over the last couple of years we've had with SCORE, SBA, Dane Hansen Foundation. The Temple is where we host our meetings. Okay, next. Strategic planning, something we've done, was one of the initial early on activities during the first 2 years. And then we go ahead, and we've just finished up, and we are waiting to get our final updated version of our strategic plan, and that'll be going out to each of you all, where you can look at see what we've got planned for the next year. And let's go to the next one, or one more. Okay, so this is what we're talking about for 2021 and beyond for the next 3 years. What a surprise, housing is top of the list. So we've been very pleased to be included in the city's plans, working with Lauren Driscoll, and we hope to bring to the table more and more potential partners that could come forward to the city, and hopefully have some consideration, some projects that would help with the housing needs we have, whether it be single family or apartment living for residents to help with not just the workforce, but also for everybody else who needs more and improved housing here in the community. So this is something that as soon as the plan is complete, which I know we're very close to, we'll be reaching out to builders, contractors in the state, including out to Kansas City, Wichita, others, trying to see, is there somebody here that has an interest in coming and doing developments or projects here? We're already, as you all well know, are getting that sort of interest, but I think we can continue to build up potential partners that would look at Salina. Workforce development continues to be a critical issue. We're in support of the Imagine Salina campaign that the Chamber is involved with. We're in support of them, and we'll work with them in any way we can to continue to help attract more workers. The child care availability and affordability is another issue that we've been a supporter of. We're not the front group on that, but we want to be very supportive of all those organizations that have that as a day-to-day calling for their another critical issue. Certified sites, that's another effort that we will be doing this end of this year and into next, getting our sites what they call shovel-ready by the state of Kansas. We know where our sites are positive. We've got good sites here. It's just a matter of going through some of the new steps they've submitted to get these projects up and going on a quicker speed. Has got to be a bigger and bigger issue for the companies that are looking to build these days. The last time I was here just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about industrial revenue bonds, and the city manager and I have talked with that, and I've submitted some things to him already for possible formats. Our commissioner who's traveling, we don't have something we can push a card in and pop out an answer, but I think we've got some good opportunities, alternatives that we can look at and come up with some additional responses in terms of how we go about working with industrial revenue bonds and how you decide how much and for how long. The last page is the finance page. We'd submitted for what we've done over the last, since 2016. You can see the 3-year blocks of how the funds, the first 3 years, and then the second 3 years, we did not ask for an increase. During that time, we stuck with our amount that $250,000. This year, we've asked for a $25,000 increase, going from $250 to $275. The county has already approved our budget request to them. They went from $20,000 to $35,000. The airport authority has not made a decision on their funding yet. And then our in-kind with the airport authority, with the chamber for our space, that won't change. So at this point, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Maybe some of my past chairmen would answer if there's anything for them as well.
Any questions for Mr. Robinson? No? Go ahead. Okay. I just had a couple. You made a reference to putting in information and getting out a card with results. And I don't know if that was a reference. I know that I specifically had requested a hope that at some point we would get some sort of development or guidelines for economic development incentives that we offer, whether that looks like IRB or CIDs or whatever, so that we can at least do some analysis in terms of the amount of private investment that's being made, say the amount of jobs that are coming in. I mean, are there any plans to, at least philosophically, put together some guidelines so that we can be making consistent decisions in the future and not treating each application as something that's just freestanding on its own?
Yeah, well, we've had, yes, the first off, the answer is yes. The programs that we've developed, I've reached out to my counterparts in about 10 communities. We've also talked with the lady that works with Gilmore and Bell. They are going to be providing some as well. I don't know if Mike's gotten anything from her yet or not, but I know she was working on that last week when I talked to her. So, yeah, the intent is definitely to put some things together and look at a comparison. The industrial revenue bonds, looking at what I've received so far, it's a lot of the very similar. I mean, the jobs, wage numbers, that sort of thing is still very similar. One of the communities that I've liked the best, how they've staggered theirs, it's based more on if you're investing so much, there's percentage, and then if you've got so many jobs, it's the same thing. It's a combination. The more jobs you have, the higher the percentage is.
Right.
But that would definitely be part of it. A lot of what we're seeing, though, is the callbacks as well, something that's discussed in the last couple of projects. You know, we've had 3 projects, 3 IRB projects. Now we've got some housing projects are going to be coming along, so that'll increase that volume. But we are definitely putting together some items, and that Dr. Davis was the one that made the comment about putting in the card in one end and the answer coming out. Well, that was for you, Dr. Davis. But we'll get that, and I feel very comfortable with what we can come up with, some responses that the commission will be
Thank you.
satisfied.
I appreciate it because I know other communities have their own guidelines, and, you know, obviously we want to develop something that is specific to our community, but, you know, I'm sure that there are a lot of commonalities. And also, I know that we're always going to have to exercise some element of discretion when taking a look at that. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Robinson? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. So that puts us into our next one, which is Salina Downtown Inc., and I think they also have representatives there. Information I did provide was there's a few sources of funding for Salina Downtown Inc., and I'm sure they'll cover this. Besides the supplement, which is the operating supplement that the city has provided, and a facade grant amount annually, the SDI does collect fees from their members downtown, and they recently were approved under the downtown CID to receive 40.6% of that collection for the maintenance of the new downtown. I provided that collection to date for you. Looks like about $89,000 through May of 2021. The piece of information I did not provide in your packet, but I have available, is there's also a portion of the downtown CID that is allocated for existing retail improvement, and that's 18.9% of the collection. And I just wanted to give you the information that the balance in that particular fund is a little over $41,000 for it, so it's existing retail improvements. So with that, we'll ask the representatives from Salina Downtown Inc. if they would like to come forward and fill us in on what's going on.
Thank you, Ms. Pack.
I'm Mike Wilson. I'm the president of the board of directors for Salina Downtown Inc., and with me today is Cassie Strite. She's our vice president of the board, and Leslie Bishop from the office, who I have to say we're very thankful. We've got her on staff right now as we experience turnover with our executive director position, so we're very thankful to have her. Jim, I think, has got our presentation here.
Did you just have the video?
It's just the video.
Okay.
And enjoy. There's supposed to be music, I believe, accompanying the slides to the video, and I'm not going to sing, so just a general overview of Salina Downtown Inc. reopening, quote unquote, after the pandemic. We can sit here and talk about the pandemic all day, but we all know about that. Obviously, the mission for Salina Downtown is to support our merchant members, BID dues paying members.
Jacob, you can play it without the music, it's fine.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Kind of a general overview for the video. Obviously, like I said earlier, we're reopening. It's the hopes for our organization to add more programming, sort of a big splash for our retailers and our merchant members. Welcome back to Salina Downtown. Obviously, the redevelopment took place that all of our merchants experience, the growing pains of the construction project, and then right after that, the COVID shutdown and restrictions. So we hope to add new programming, bigger events with our First Friday offerings from May through October. And then obviously a big piece of why we're here today is the facade grant. We feel is important for SDI and our existing merchants just because it's huge for new development, bringing new businesses, new property owners to downtown, but also, retaining tenants and, offering some assistance to help spruce up the aesthetic of downtown, but also, there we go. But also improve existing structures within the downtown district.
You want me to start it over? I think
Please do.
And apologies to Ms. Pack, because I am seeing that we are not going to come anywhere close to getting through our whole packet today.
That's okay.
Please do. That's what I said.
That's okay.
I really thought I figured it out there, but maybe I didn't.
Well, I thought Mr. Wilson was doing pretty well there.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
I think we can just keep rolling and
Well, okay.
we don't need all the sizzle.
Boom.
If you want to do a little dance, that's it.
I only dance at wedding receptions. I hope that,
Well, I'm glad we
Not
got
in
to see
everybody's
part
head.
part of it with the music. and
I
we'll
hope that's
just
not
let
in
you
everybody's
continue.
head, the whistling for the next
Yeah.
24 hours. So. Could be, you're right. So two items that we asked for increased funding, I think that are in front of you is $55,000 in operational expense from the city, and then $75,000 for facade funding. The facade grant was frozen, I believe, last year for 2021, so we're unable to provide that grant to any existing merchants or future merchants. I can say that there were some before and after photos on the video, and we did go through 2020's allocated budget for the facade grant within the first 5.5 months of 2020. So it is a real successful program that actually does drive some development within the downtown. And the vast majority of those those projects, the work was done by local service providers. I can just provide some examples. Glass Services and the great work that they do. Ponton's Construction, Accurate Electric, Gleason Signs, Restore Properties obviously has done a lot of really big facade improvement projects downtown. So those are just some of the examples of sort of local business generation that also happens with the facade improvement grant program.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wilson or Ms. Stride?
And the facade dollars have to be used on the outside of the building only, correct?
That's correct. So whether it be the front or rear elevations, or in some cases, if it's a three-sided building on a hard corner, yeah, absolutely outside of the building. And there's two separate grant programs. One's the mini grant, which is up to a $3,500 project cost, which I think you're all aware, which is a 2-to-1 match. And then the larger forgivable loan is for every $1.50 spent by the applicant, the grant provides them $1 in assistance.
Most of those been used immediately on Santa Fe, or is anyone applying?
We do have some that have taken place on 7th Street and 5th Street, so it's all within the actual downtown district, but yeah, the vast majority have taken place on Santa Fe. And then Iron Street as well. I know the Flower Nook had a smaller mini grant that they used, but yeah, you're right, most have been on Santa Fe.
Could I clarify something really quickly with Ms. Pack? So the SDI Maintenance Fund has approximately $90,000 in it, and then separately, in the existing retail account, there's $41,000. Just wanted to,
We have paid out the 89,000 SDI in the maintenance. That gets paid out to them monthly.
okay,
There have been no applications in the existing retailer improvement. CID portion of that, yes, has about a little over 41,000.
thank you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Ryan, I didn't mean to interrupt. I don't know if you had other
No,
questions.
that was fine. It just occurs to me, there's a few buildings on 5th and 7th that I'd like to see apply. I wish you'd go twist their arms a little bit.
Well, send me a list. We'll see if they want to do the projects.
Is the maintenance,
Building.
is the maintenance fund being used to fund the part-time employee that is helping to keep downtown clean, or is that part of the,
No,
Is
that's,
that the funds
no,
coming through
that's
the
part
STAR
of the
funds?
payroll budget for
Okay.
the office.
The maintenance is paid before trash pickup. The
Over,
contract.
it is.
I do believe.
We did contract with an outside service provider to dump the trash from the black trash receptacles, that is part of
I've
it.
noticed, because that was taken over from the city, because the city used to
Correct.
do that, and that's now being done by SDI.
That's correct.
Aside from like the trash pickup, what else is coming out of the, like the downtown maintenance fund? Do you have any?
The flowers.
The flower pot contract.
Okay.
And what else is there?
Any service that needs to be done to our truck from here on out comes out of maintenance, the upkeep of our equipment, things like that.
Okay, so maintenance of materials and stuff like that? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And the eligible uses are covered by the transfer agreement that we entered into with SDI, so kind of spells out those parameters. What's relatively new in terms of revenue being in place, and there was a dollar amount that had to be accrued and exceeded to go back to the developer, the master developer, before any money flowed to SDI. So it's relatively new in terms of timing it being available to SDI, and we're still trying to settle in to see what that number actually turns out to be on an ongoing basis.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's correct. That payment out to SBI did not begin until October of 2020. After that, a balance was approved. I will clarify on the facade budget for 2021, the direction that we received from commission a year ago was that we were going to put a placeholder in the 2021 budget, and that we were going to revisit that in 2021. So we do have those dollars set aside. So that's part of the discussion that we'll have when we come to issues and options, is whether we release that. We had $47,500 set aside for 2021. And if we do that, then what that might do for their 2022 request.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
How far do you think we can get in terms of, where's the,
One thing you might want to do is just take citizen comment in case anyone is here to speak on any of these items, to ensure that we cover that. And then I'll defer to Debbie to kind of walk you through what information we can get through in the remaining time.
okay, great. All right.
And if you would like, we just have one more slide that
Okay.
kind of shows other outside agencies, and that would kind of complete that whole section.
Okay, let's go for it.
So we do provide $20,000 a year per our agreement with the Salina Municipal Band. We provide maintenance for the Salina Art Center and Salina Community Theater, and you can see kind of where those dollars have been historically. And as you know, we've been having some discussion about Salina Media Connection. We've been given instruction to bring the service of the meetings in-house. So that, and I know we'll be coming back to you today also. So that's just another outside entity that we are providing funding for. So that, I just want to put that in the conversation, and then we can go to the public comment and then probably pick up the rest of this next week. I think the information provided to you gives you enough detail to go into what we will be talking about next week unless you have specific questions on it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Pack. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak in regards to the agencies that we've discussed today? And just to refresh your memory on what those are, we've talked about funding requests from OCCK, Visit Salina, the Salina Community Economic Development Organization, and Salina Downtown, Inc., as well as the last slide that that we displayed up there, the municipal band and the Salina Community Theater and the Salina Arts Center. So if we have anybody that wants to speak to the funding of the outside agencies, this is your time to come up and let us know how you feel. No takers and no takers online? All right, well then we'll return to this. Do you want to try to get into any of the capital improvement plans or?
What we cover today is the last we have to cover next week. So Debbie, you might go ahead and cover what you can.
Yeah, I think we can probably get through I won't go through everything that's on here. The capital improvement requests are pretty minimal for this year. We've talked about the Salina, or the relocation of Fire Station 4. We're recommending in the 2022-2026 capital improvement plan that we only fund the design of that in 2022. And that goes back to the whole timing issue of how those projects are designed and then built and then funded, so that pushes that funding off from a permanent basis down a couple of years and kind of ties better with our debt financing schedule that we're trying to get through. The other thing that's on here that I would note would be the second construction phase of the Smoky Hill River renewal. We know that's not on time because we haven't started construction for the 2021 section. So we just have that in here just because that's kind of the timeline that we had in previous plans. The rest of these are all annual allocations that we've done for high-bike trail parks and streets. There were 3 projects that we've discussed during strategic planning and during our discussions of excess fund balances for the facility maintenance building, the fire alerting system, and then we brought into the conversation the public works building. Just things to look forward to and kind of in those discussions of those excess funding, we did discuss a couple of those smaller projects in there. So that kind of is the CIP plan for 2022 to 2026. This will actually come back to you probably in the fall for formal approval. It doesn't necessarily affect the operating budget for 2022 because it's all either financed other than the cash portions, and those will come back in those operating budgets. Then what we wanted to provide you, Jacob, if you want to move it on to the payroll section, which is slide 11. Just background information on KPERS and KPNF rates. They didn't increase significantly, so we don't anticipate that those are going to have significant increases on our fund balances or on our budget for 2022. On the next slide, we provide kind of just the basics of what are some of those costs that are associated with personnel. Oftentimes we think of personnel and we think salaries, but there's a lot more to it. Every time you raise a salary, you raise an overtime rate, you might raise shift differentials or anything like that. So that's information we just wanted to provide so that you can see how when we have these conversations about salary increases, kind of what gets offset and what other things we have to take into consideration when we calculate those figures. The next slide is actually the staffing table. The table on the right or left is what was authorized in 2021. And you can see we had total staffing of 491 employees. That included mostly full-time, but some classified and regular part-time. This does not include seasonal part-time, which is a lot of our mowing, our lifeguards, our rec employees, those types of employees. Those are considered seasonal, so are not part of our authorized staffing table. The recommendations and some of the things we've seen since this 2021 authorization are the two additional positions in the city manager's office, one for the assistant city manager, and then one for a multimedia specialist. We have one for a multimedia coordinator, but that's being offset by the engagement coordinator that we have. So that's 2 new positions. There's 1 reduction in municipal court for a deputy court clerk. There's 2 additions in police for 2 dispatchers. 2.5 is the net in parks and recreation. They took a supervisor and exchanged that for a park tech. And we're also recommending to add 2 custodial staff. And then 6.5 reduction in public works, and that's in sanitation. Directly related to the automated sanitation, where we're able to take less, we won't have runners in some of those instances. So overall, the effect of the staffing table for 2022, that sets us at a -1 net change, which then authorizes 490 positions in the staffing table. Just to move along, and if you have questions, we can go back over this probably next week when we talk about these decisions going forward. This is just information on what we've done in the past as far as pay plan increases. As you can see, it was all over the place. For a while, we weren't doing anything. For a while, we tried to do both COLAs and merits. And I will just remind you that a COLA, which is the cost of living, is given to every employee, regardless of how long they've been here or where they are in their salary range. Typically on January 1st, but it doesn't have to be on January 1st. It could be any point of time during the year. A merit is given based on performance, and that is usually typically a range of 0 to 2 to 3%. And that is given to employees based on their performance evaluation, and is not given to employees who have reached the top of their salary range. So that's why we kind of look at those two in 2 different aspects as far as what they might affect. And as we budget those, we can budget a COLA all at once because it's typically given all at once, and then merits we kind of have to budget throughout the year based on when people's actual anniversary dates happen. So the next slide, we tried to give you an estimate of what different options might be for salary increases. And we've included salaries and benefits, so this is the taxes and the other items that I mentioned earlier. We've given you 4 options, the dollar amounts applicable to 4 options, which is a 0 merit, 0 COLA, 2 merit, 0 COLA, 0 merit, 2 COLA, and a 2 merit and a 2 COLA. And as you can see, at the very bottom is the estimated total cost over all funds of each of those options. And that's the increased cost to those funds. Goes from 0 to a little over $820,000 at the 2% merit, 2% COLA. There are many other options out there that you might want to consider, and we could certainly give you those amounts and what those costs might be. That's probably the biggest discussion point we might want to have at this point. And then the last slide just gives you kind of where we're going to be. Because we have to provide the county by July 20th, whether we're going to go over the revenue neutral rate. On July 12th, we'll need to make some of these funding decisions so we can see where specifically the general fund will end up, so that we can determine whether that property tax levy is going to be at the revenue neutral rate or something other than that rate. If you choose that that's going to be higher, then we will need to notify the county. We'll need to set a budget hearing date that we need to have to them when we give them the maximum mill rate. So we'll make all those kind of decisions on July 12th. July 19th, we hope to come back to you with those decisions with the final budget draft. And during that July 19th actual commission meeting, we will have to set the maximum mill rate and schedule a public hearing date so that we can meet that July 20th deadline to the county. Now, the calendar goes two very different directions depending on what that decision is, and I didn't want to go there until we had that decision. So if there's any questions or comments or any other additional information we can get you before July 12th, be glad to take that now, and we'll try to get it for you.
Thank you, Ms. Pack. Any questions regarding personnel?
Commissioners, I would tell you, staff's been working very diligently on trying to get as accurate as possible a cost estimate for personnel expenses, just as we try to come up with a balanced budget and determine the affordability of COLAs and merits. Getting that baseline expense is difficult, given some of our financial and software challenges we've had in years past. But we're trying to dial that in. We're trying to dial in sales tax revenue projections. And we've talked before about these are pretty uncertain times and lots of differing variables contributing to that projection. But, and then also looking at, cost savings in terms of reductions of expenditures and reducing expenditure requests. So I don't want to, it's a little too soon to say, but we're still trying to work those to try to bring back to you a balanced budget that can support COLAs and merits, if at all possible.
When do you anticipate, I know we've talked about this quite a bit in the past, and it hasn't risen quite to the top of the list yet, but in terms of doing the pay study that we've been talking about, because something I would like to not do is get so far behind on where we need to be in paying our employees that when those recommendations come to us, that
Right.
we don't have a $2 million annual sticker shock or something like that.
We've put out requests for proposals, we've received responses, we've conducted initial interviews, and so as we've talked about the budget timeline, we don't expect to have that by the time you adopt this budget. It'll probably come mid-budget year, but our hope is that as we settle in a little bit more in terms of everything from accommodations and travel and those type of things, when we have the pay plan recommendation coming in and a cost allocation associated with that, we can also kind of visit our financial performance. If we have any growth at all, we might be able to apply that growth to implementing that pay plan.
Mayor Hodges, if I could just ask a piggyback question. Have there ever been any theoretical scenarios what our payroll would look like if we adopted a minimum wage of $15 an hour?
We have not run that number to my knowledge. And part of it becomes the question of compression adjustments across all the pay ranges. If it was just, that being the minimum pay rate, that's probably an easier calculation to make, but I don't know that that's how we would ultimately implement it.
Just a Saturday evening exercise if you have nothing to do one week.
I'd be happy to delegate that.
Oh, darn it, Ms. Fisher's still here. Whoops.
I do think that that's a topic of conversation for the pay plan consultants, for sure.
I do, and I know we need to take a quick break before the meeting, but one final question, just because I know it's come up in the past. Seeing that we are eliminating 7 sanitation worker positions, we're not firing 7 sanitation workers. We're not letting them go. Just as those positions, 0, just as those positions have become open, we haven't filled them. So it shows as a net decrease, but it's not like when we get our automated system, 7 people are going to be losing their jobs. So I just wanted to make that clear.
We've been filling those with a temp service, and
Yeah.
in fact, we've had some conversations about whether any of those temp employees might merit transitioning into other openings in the organization.
Thank you. In that case, we will resume in here at 4, in case anybody needs to take a break.